Well, good morning. My name is Tanya McConnell. I think we've met. I'm currently a high school social studies teacher in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm teaching an AP World History class and a couple of human geography classes. And it's great to be here with you guys. I'll ask my colleagues, the one Rita you've met and Mike you have not yet met. So Rita, will you introduce yourself?
I'm still Rita McCann, and I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. It's great to see you guys again.
And I'm Mike Miles for the first time since I didn't get to see you yesterday. Aaron, I'm trying to figure out how you managed to get on this unit here. That was pretty good. That was pretty good maneuvering, I think, to get in here with these guys, but you're badly outnumbered. I hope that you can win some votes over the next few minutes. Thank y'all for doing this. I think we have your whole team on the page with us, which is kind of fun to have them in it too. So welcome to them. And this is going to be, they bragged on you, by the way. Dr. McConnell and Rita McCannon bragged on you yesterday and talked about how good you were. So this is going to be fun for me to watch. Thank you.
And so I forgot, Rita, have you introduced yourself? We've all introduced ourselves.
Yes, sir. We just need to hear from them.
I lose track of where we are in the process. So if you guys would introduce yourselves and introduce your teacher again.
Hello, judges. We're a team from Evergreen Middle School, and we're going to be representing Unit 2. Our teacher is the wonderful Miss Kessler, and I'm Akar Shvala.
I'm Ananya Diddy.
I'm Surabhi Kandinya.
I'm Aaron Burden.
Hi, my name is Manya Pradeep Narayan, and it is a pleasure to be with you today.
And it is a pleasure to be with you. Well, let's get down to business. We're still on Unit 2, and as you probably deduced, we're interested in question number 2. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson stated that governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. From what sources do the people derive the right to establish government? How is the consent of the governed related to the concept of popular sovereignty? Does natural rights philosophy justify a right to revolution? Why or why not? Why might the principles and practices of self-government contained in the Declaration of Independence have been considered radical at the time? If you're ready, please begin.
Jefferson said that people derived their rights from natural law, an unchanging doctrine guaranteed to the people. These natural-born rights include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence was written because many colonists believed that these rights were not protected under the tyranny of Great Britain's monarchy.
This view on fundamental rights is largely based on the theories and beliefs of John Locke. As he said in his manifesto on government and rights, the 2 treatises of government, the natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth, and not to be under the will or legislative authority of man, but to have only the law of nature for his rule, a liberty to follow my own will in all things where the rule prescribes not, and not to be subject to the inconstant, uncertain, unknown, arbitrary will of another man. Locke cited this as natural law. He also advocated for a moral contract, a duty each person had to everyone else, not to kill, enslave, steal, and more, in order to protect the natural rights of others.
However, in a system of anarchy, the weak were not able to enforce this moral contract against the strong. A method to counteract this, proposed by various philosophers like Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, was having a higher power or social contract that would protect the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The American government was created to be this higher power. It derives power from the consent of the governed because those governed then can make the choices that directly impact them, rather than a monarch who is not directly impacted by the decisions they make. However, because the government is based around popular sovereignty, people consent to forfeit their right to total autonomy over all their actions in exchange for having security as a part of a larger society.
If the government violates the social contract, the people can take actions against it. When groups of people are persecuted and natural rights are blatantly denied, revolution becomes necessary to defend the common good. This has been achieved through both violent and nonviolent methods. An example of a nonviolent revolution is the civil rights movement. The rights of African American people were ignored. The rights were under attack by the government that was meant to protect them. Plessy versus Ferguson ruled for a separate but equal society, but that is inherently unequal, proving that this persecution called for a revolution. One key example of a violent revolution was the American Revolution. The rights of the colonists were constantly disregarded and violated, which made a revolution by any means necessary. As said in the Declaration of Independence, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government.
Beliefs and the philosophy in the Declaration of Independence were no new concept, but by any means they weren't widespread. The beliefs seem radical because for most of human history, the rule was the strong over the weak, the rich over the poor, the elite over the masses. Rulers were supposedly given their power by God, a statement used to justify and solidify the control of the powerful. However, the Declaration of Independence reversed the rules, saying instead that the government drew its power from the consent of the governed.
The government is meant to serve the people and to protect their rights. People derive their rights from natural law, an unchanging set of higher laws unaffected by man. These natural-born rights include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our nation was built on the foundation that these natural rights are guaranteed, and the government does so by deriving its power from the people. Our testimony has concluded.
And a great place for us to start, with a lot of places for us to follow up. I assume that none of you are 18 years old as of yet. So how is it possible, or is it possible for you to give your consent to be governed?
While we can't while we can't directly vote and influence our legislators or the executive branch, we can have influence by our voices, by the social media platforms we have today, by protests. So despite not being 18 yet and the inability to directly vote or make decisions, we can still influence decisions through the influence we have with our generation.
Some more examples include participating in conversations with our families and participating in conversations throughout, well, taking part in protests, as my colleague said. We have voices and we use them even though we can't vote.
So are you obligated to obey the rules? Are you obligated under natural law to obey the rules? Or do you simply obey the rule? Should people who are not able to give their consent, must they simply obey the rules out of fear of the consequences, or are they in fact giving their consent by being part of that society? I guess I'm asking about an implied consent.
Yes, as citizens of this nation, of our states, we consent to follow the rules in exchange for certain freedoms, for certain liberties. As Jean-Jacques Rousseau said in his The Social Contract, people are constrained to obey, and it does well to obey, but it gets its liberty back by the same right, namely force, that it took away in the first place. Any justification for taking it away equally justifies taking it back, and if there was no justification for its being taken away. So essentially, as citizens, we forfeit certain rights, like total autonomy, in exchange for the protections that being part of this larger society gives us.
Outstanding. Rita.
I wonder if you observed in January the protests that occurred in Washington, and whether that was an appropriate protest, or whether in fact it stepped on your rights as Americans and those who were in the House of Representatives and the Senate that day.
So these protests were invalid. America had not invalidated any of the rights of the people. The people did feel that their rights were taken away, but in truth, none of the rights were violated, and it was just a angry protest that was not deemed right.
In addition to my colleague, I believe that the protest that took place and their method of protesting an election that they believed was unfair but really wasn't, invalidated the rights of other American citizens, as every American citizen has the right to a fair election, but by trying to overturn one, they are stepping on the rights of other people.
Yeah, I also agree with my colleague. They're also stepping on the right to life because we saw that I think it was five people died because of all of the chaos in the Capitol insurrection. And yeah,
Revolution is justified when the rights of the people are ignored or blatantly denied. And in this case, they weren't. In the War of 1812, a famous revolution, Madison in his war message claimed that many American citizens were being torn from the safeguard of their home. And in this case, the same rights were not being violated, and therefore a revolution was not justified.
4 years ago, after the presidential election, more than 1 million women went to Washington, D.C. and marched. And there was a march. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and there was a pretty large march here. There were marches all over the country claiming that their rights were being ignored. It's been nearly 250 years since all these rights were promised to us, if they had to be promised to us, natural rights, presumably you were born with. 250 years after the Constitution said all men, after the Declaration of Independence said all men are created equal. Are women's rights in this country equal to men's rights now? Have we gotten to where those words have become true? Or when you try to join a law firm or develop a medical practice and you're a resident in a medical practice and you're a woman in this country, do you think your rights are equal now after 250 years to the men in this country, or if we still not got that figured out?
I believe that America has made great strides on the subject of women's rights. Before, they were relegated to being under the control of their husband. They were treated as objects. They were treated as, well, so to speak, arm candy. And that doesn't happen as much anymore. Yes, there are still effects. 250 years is a long time, but it is not long enough to sometimes remove some of the institutional I guess, differences or the biases that some people might hold, as you can see by there being no female president so far in America. But I do believe that it's improving by a lot. I mean, there are so many women running for president now, and I believe that this is a trend that will continue in the future. There are so many women going into college and graduating from college and taking up jobs in the medical field and in STEM fields and in humanities fields. I believe that, yes, while it might not still be perfect as seen by the wage gap, as seen by, also the differences between how women get time off from work when they give birth to a baby and when men get time off from work when they give birth to a baby. America has made so many great strides, and I truly believe that it will continue to make great strides.
Boy,
I
Mon,
agree
I hope you're right. Go ahead.
Sorry. I agree with my colleague. I also believe that the current president is taking great steps to further improve this, as his cabinet is now much more inclusive and it has many more women than most other president cabinets.
I also agree with my colleague because, as you can see, Kamala Harris became the first woman vice president, and we've definitely made a lot of improvements since 250 years ago. And I think that we're gonna keep improving, even though it might never be fully equal, because people will still have their biases. We'll definitely make more improvements.
That's a great place for us to end. Good job. Once again, I think it's a very impressive set of arguments. I try to keep note of the different points you're making. My hand was getting tired because you were making a point, setting up, you're giving us a thesis and then giving us an example of support that. You answered our questions extremely well. I like that, you bring in the idea of anarchy and versus a moral contract. The anarchism is a legitimate way to think about government. But it has that major problem with it is that, like you said, the weak will always lose out to the strong. So anarchism is attractive to the strong and not so attractive to the vast majority of people. Great job there, great presentation, and I liked the calm confidence that you brought to the table. That was great. And so, Rita, what do you think?
If I could be in your class. I really, really like how you have all absorbed all this information and you're talking about it as though it's your own. And I love what you're saying about women making strides. I'm one of those that came up during a time when, well, no, of course you can't do that. And when you start to try things and you're banging your head against, as Hillary Clinton used to say, that glass ceiling, and all you're doing is making cracks. But we have to keep making cracks. And I appreciated your responses to my questions as well as the guys, because you were able to answer them. I really thought it was a great job today. Thanks.
I can give you a practical example. Rita was the first female intern in the athletic department at her school and was working very hard and well accepted and well appreciated in that department. And then the team traveled to Georgia Tech to play a game, and she, doing her job, climbed up the steps to the press box to hand out the information to the sports writers, and the sports information director at Georgia Tech would not let her in the press box. Said, as long as I'm here, no woman will be allowed in the press box at this school. So she had to stand outside the room and hand it to somebody else to get them to do it. We have come a long way. This is a unit that you can refer to court cases in. And Tandy, I think it may be the first time all day, dropping Plessy v. Ferguson on us right in the middle of the essay. My head snapped up when they did that. that gives it to that. I thought the quote, Aaron, that quote was a perfect quote to use in the middle of this and a powerful one. I love that in the historical perspective. Mania, this is probably the only time all day that we will hear the term arm candy, but it was a very appropriate expression and a good time to use it in answer to the question. That was really good. My final observation is Dr. McConnell was a college professor for a long time, and he felt the call somehow. I bet he wishes sometimes that he'd had it sooner to go and teach middle school. Nicole, we felt today like you had done it the other way around, that you started teaching middle school and started teaching college, because these guys right here could compete at any college in the world, not just in our country, but in the world. I said before, sometimes I'm just struck by it. There's an old proverb that says the greatest gift, there you are. I'm glad you popped in with us, that the greatest gift a person can have in life is the gift of a good teacher. My soul, have the five of you been gifted with someone who is obviously a marvelous teacher, because stay in touch with her. When you go to high school, call her back. When you're in college, call her back and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'm writing this essay and I'm not sure whether I want to go this way or that. What advice can you give me? Stay in touch with her, because she is invested in you. She is deeply invested in the five of your lives. And we could see that today as clearly as anything in the world. Nicole, they represented you incredibly well today. They really did. Dr. McConnell, thank you for all this. And Ms. Schaefer, we're at your disposal.